My name is Siobhan Claire, as Claire said. And I started as projects officer at People with Disabilities, ACT, last year. We're a very small organisation, and we've been quite busy lately. And we have a committee of people with disabilities, as we are a disabled people's organisation, run for and by people with disabilities. So we aim to represent, inform and advocate for Canberrans with disabilities. And when I talk about advocacy, we've already sort of touched on systemic advocacy slightly. I'm not talking about advocating for individuals to get a better outcome, as ADACAS or Advocacy for Inclusion or, some of the legal services in Canberra would do, but systemic advocacy. And that is, systemic advocacy seeks to remove barriers and address discrimination. Sure, sorry.
It's just, I think, covering your face.
Oh, yeah, gotcha. Okay. So seeks to remove barriers and address discrimination to ensure the rights of people with disability. Essentially, as the name suggests, trying to change the system. Rather than helping one individual who's having problems and struggling to find their way through the system, systemic advocacy organisations step back and look more broadly, asking what are the problems that lots of people are encountering, how can we address those struggles that many people are facing, and make the system better for everyone. And I'd like to acknowledge that our second speaker today is an excellent and outstanding systemic advocate and is involved in a range of roles and processes trying to make the system better for people with disabilities and their families and carers. And you'll see on the left of this photo that there's our Executive Officer, Robert Altamore, who couldn't join us today, but is the one taking the lead on the systemic advocacy around the NDIS. So here's a more serious photo of him from the Canberra Times and a quote. As people with disabilities, we have less money, less knowledge and less buying power than service providers and policymakers. All too often, we are not seen as valued customers. The inaccessibility of the physical, technological and social environments keeps us in our houses and out of the offices, shops and playing fields. Our invisibility compounds our disempowered situation. So this quote is taken from a publication PWDACT produced about a year ago. It was, we partnered with ADACAS to do it, and it's the Canberra Disability Review, and you'll see that there's also a column from Fiona May in there. And it's been edited by Craig Wallace, who used to be the campaigns manager at PWDACT, and I'll quote him now. It's now 8 years since the National Disability and Carers Council released the Shutout Report, which casts a critical eye over the many ways that governments, community and the marketplace has failed to step up for people with a disability. It's also more than 6 years since the NDIS moved from concept to government intent as a result of the hard efforts of a group of advocates, politicians, public servants, service providers, and dedicated people. So what I wanted to underline with these quotes was that the brave new world of the NDIS and this big reform and an investment in disability supports by Australian governments was forged in response to systemic advocacy and a collective nationwide recognition that people with disabilities were being shut out and failed by various systems and often had no power of choice at all over how they received support. But being such a big reform, it was never going to start off as a well-functioning system, as we may have realised by this stage. So despite the big successes of this movement, and particularly the Every Australian Counts campaign, in getting the government to commit to funding the scheme and enacting legislation, Systemic advocacy has been and continues to be vital in every step of the way to try and keep the system forming and operating in a way that is true to its original intentions of making life better for people with disabilities. Having the power to make choices and be in control of your disability supports is a key principle underpinning the scheme. And these are ideas that were intended to guide how the legislation is interpreted and how the system operates. For instance, one of the objects of the Act is to enable people with disability to exercise choice and control in the pursuit of their goals and the planning and delivery of their supports. And one of the general principles guiding action under the legislation is people with disabilities should be supported to exercise choice, which kind of touches on the supported decision-making we talked about earlier, including in relation to taking reasonable risks in the pursuit of their goals and the planning and delivery of their supports. So in this volume of the Canberra Disability Review, we took the chance to stand back and ask whether the market is really starting to respond and deliver more choice and control for people with a disability, or whether we are witnessing an unravelling market failure for people with disability in the specialist service sector. So, yeah, this volume aimed to ignite and stimulate discussion of how well choice and control for people with disability has progressed. It also included this unique infographic which shows how disability supports mainstream systems and choice and control interact with underpinning rights and the convention of the rights of persons with disability. The game-style layout was designed to be thought-provoking and interactive with a serious side, inviting readers to interact with the key support elements and to get a feeling for how chance and randomness often seem to characterise many people's experiences of trying to get the disability supports they need while navigating the wide range of complex systems and barriers facing people with disabilities. Recently, our Executive Officer, Robert Altamore, made a submission to the Legislative Assembly, the ACT Legislative Assembly, which had one of their standing committees do an inquiry into the NDIS implementation. And he'll soon be appearing before that, I believe, that they have the hearing soon. And I'll use this particular inquiry and submission as a bit of a case study as to how how our organisation advocates for improvements to the NDIS and the ACT level. So in conjunction with our AGM in February, we held a public forum to allow attendees an opportunity to share their experiences of being a participant or trying to become one. We believe it is, we also ran some online surveys, and the Disability Reference Group also ran this type of consultation, and they also, I think, as we were discussing, it was a great idea to have drop-in sessions where, because some people don't really feel like getting up in the middle of a public forum and telling their story to a crowd of people that they don't know. So I think, if we can find ways that people can share their stories to then feed into systemic improvements, and clickability is really one of those. So, we believe that the ACT level stuff is very important to be participating in. But as you know, with the transition to the scheme, a lot of it is becoming harmonised and centralised with the funding, power and policy design really mostly at the national level, as the N stands for national. And we're ultimately trying to effect change at this federal government level and influence the decisions made by legislators and policymakers for the whole of Australia. However, informing and influencing the ACT government is very important to help them, improve the different systems that interface with the NDIS. As Peter was describing, there are all these different systems, a lot of them at the state or territory level, that are, overlap, and in terms of people's lives, they really need to be working well for the NDIS to be delivering on its goals. So we need to be improving those systems in conjunction, and also figuring out, we had a forum yesterday on housing and how the housing system interacts with the NDIS, and even people's feedback on how, people will seem to shift responsibility, or you don't get clear information about who is responsible. So where do you take your concern? It's very important that we be improving these systems. And then also, if we can inform the ACT government, they will make their efforts to change the system through the Council of Australian Governments, or COAG, where all governments come together to negotiate and coordinate the intergovernmental activities that are involved with the NDIS. So sorry, this is all getting quite, theoretical, but I will bring it back. Another mechanism that was set up to provide oversight of the NDIS is one involving another group of politicians, this time at the federal level. A number of MPs and senators are members of the Joint Standing Committee on the National Disability Insurance Scheme. So this is another place you can share your experiences. They encourage people to make submissions and give them information about their experiences with how the scheme is being implemented and operating. So that's something that our executive officer has also done in the past, providing input for their regular progress reports, and then they also sometimes do inquiries into particular issues. And I'll just very quickly mention that there's also another independent evaluation more on the research side, which is just being commissioned by the federal government to try and see, to get data about how effectively the NDIS is operating. And obviously they have their own reports, but it's good to have these systems trying to make things, hold the system to account as it develops, the NDIA, but also how it's interacting with other systems. So I wanted to stress that contributing to systemic advocacy doesn't necessarily mean, protesting in the traditional sense, hitting the streets, picking up a placard, or posting a hashtag to social media, or even talking to any politicians, because, we all know that's quite unpleasant. So you may wish to do so, though, if there's something that you feel really passionate about. You can get involved in that kind of grassroots action. However, it can be as simple as sharing your story, talking about your experiences, and you can do this in a public forum, whether it's showing up to talk at one or participating in active online forums. There's very active Facebook groups that share information, but also are contributing to identification of what are the big issues that people are really complaining about. So you can do that, but you can also, if you feel more comfortable sharing something not in a public forum, you can email politicians, you can email other advisory bodies, emailing one of the standing committees, talking or emailing a systemic advocacy organisation or systemic advocate, or answering questions in an online survey or in some other format where, you can share your story. And, like Clickability, it's, providing these reviews or these experiences of how you've interacted with the system, whether it's emailing that feedback at ndis.gov.au, or trying to make sure that it's going to external places to then be collated and contribute to systemic improvements. So I think that pretty much covers everything that I really wanted to say. And I just want to thank Claire for organising this excellent event.